Welcome, fellow immigrants. And in truth, we are a nation of immigrants. Even Native Americans, as we understand it, centuries ago, their forebears came across the straits from Siberia. So we are truly all a nation of immigrants. And so it's with great privilege and honor that, in fact, we focus in these remarks on this important issue of immigration. It is an issue that is galvanizing and sometimes dividing our society. And we need to think clearly on these issues. We need to connect the issues of immigration with the issues of employment and fairness in our society. And Eliseo Medina will be doing that for us tonight. What I'd like to do is say a few words about our speaker. I'd like to, in fact, say two words to sort of as the touchstones for really this introduction, and those two words are justice and innovation. Eliseo Medina has been described by the Los Angeles Times as one of the most successful labor organizers in our country. He has served as the International Vice President of the SEIU, the Service Employees International Union, since 1996, when he became the first Mexican-American to be elected to a top post in this union of 1.8 million members. By the way, the SEIU represents workers in healthcare, in service, in public employment, in many different walks of life. Eliseo was born in Mexico. He came to California when his parents were part of a guest workers program called the Bracero program. He joined his family workers in the Delano area at the age of 10, working in the fields. And he became involved in the efforts to improve the lot of the farm workers. He became active in the United Farm Workers Union, worked with the famous organizer Cesar Chavez, who at the age 21 sent Eliseo to Chicago to spread word on the Great Boycott. I understand that he had $20 in his pocket, a plane ticket, and a bag full of buttons to sell, and a friendly postal worker that he worked with, and was very successful. And within a few years, the boycott led to collective bargaining negotiations. And at that point, Eliseo returned back to Southern California, where the focus was on organizing and collective bargaining. In 1978, he joined the SEIU and was assigned to the San Diego local. He inherited a local with 1,700 members, and in 5 years, there were 10,000 members in that union. He became a key strategist in the Justice for Janitors campaign in the Los Angeles area. And so there's a theme here that you see around justice, around fair working conditions, organizing to help people, particularly the people most at risk and most disadvantaged in our society. But I also want to sound the theme of innovation. Eliseo worked with more than 100,000 home care workers in California to focus on improving the quality of care for the people that they serve, the seniors, the people with handicaps and disabilities. And that's about innovation, about thinking of new ways to deliver service. And certainly he is leading the SEIU in thinking about what does a modern union do in terms of not just focusing on wages, hours, and working conditions, but on a broader mission of service to society, service with a capital S. Medina has felt, obviously, deep feelings on the issues of immigration, and he's worked closely to build ties with the Roman Catholic Church and the labor movement to bring up these issues clearly. The Sacramento Bee has called him a quietly charismatic leader. And really, the organizing isn't just around collective bargaining. It's really organizing people who need to have voice on these critical immigration issues. This is an important lecture in the series. We're privileged to help co-sponsor this and really to see this discussion take place. We don't see this as a one-time event. That as an institute, we're committed to dialogue on this and other important issues in our state. In fact, on March 2nd, Tom Kochen, a leading scholar in the industrial relations field, will be coming to our program to give a talk on reclaiming the American dream. And it's all part of a larger dialogue around promoting innovation at the state and at national levels so that we can, as a nation, not be on this race to the bottom. That we can, in fact, find that high road where good jobs, better service, better quality combine together in ways that represent justice and innovation. So please join me in welcoming Eliseo Medina, please.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Dean Kutcher-Hirschenfeld, for your very kind introduction, and to the Institute of Labor and Industrial Relations for inviting me to be with you tonight. I would also like to thank my very good friend of 40 years, longer than most of you here been alive, but we met when I came to Chicago to work on the Great Boycott, and he's been a great friend. Was one of the people that helped us to win justice for farm workers by being a real supporter, real ally in the fight for social justice and for farm workers, Ron Peters. I want to thank him for inviting me to be here with you tonight. I also would like to recognize and thank my fellow executive board member from SEIU, our international executive board member, Christine Boardman, and also president of Local 73 of SEIU, and many of my fellow SEIU members who are here with us tonight. Thank you for joining us here tonight. And I want to thank all of you tonight for providing me an opportunity to share with you some of my thoughts about one of the major issues facing our country today, an issue that speaks to our values and traditions as a nation of immigrants, and it speaks about our beliefs that everyone should have an opportunity to aspire to the American dream. I think that that dream is getting further out of reach for working people in this country. And I believe that if we're to change this, we have to unite all workers, regardless of immigration status, to fight for our common cause. If we don't do that, conditions will continue to deteriorate for all workers and for their families. And I believe that that's going to affect each and every one of us, regardless of whether we belong to a union or not, whether we live in a city or in a small town, whether we're immigrants or native born, and regardless of our ethnic heritage. We can see it every day. Good jobs are being exported overseas. There's a growing wealth inequality in this country, a lack of opportunity, and hope for the future. I think that in this country, we're moving backwards, not moving forward. I think all of you in this room know what I'm talking about, because things are getting downright ugly for working families in this country. I'll give you a couple of examples of what I mean. There are 46.6 million people without health insurance in this country. These are people, most of them, who are working full-time, not people who don't have coverage because they're not working or are lazy. We have millions more who live with a fear every day of losing coverage or lose their pay raises to premium increases. People that are one illness away from emotional and financial disaster. And because people don't have health insurance, they put off going to a doctor because they can't afford it. So when they do go to a doctor, they are so sick that they need more urgent care, and the emergency room winds up becoming their family doctor. Now, all of this puts more pressure on an already fragile healthcare system, triggering off more financial pressures, understaffing, a downward spiral of emergency room closures, and a decline in the quality of care for all of us. At the same time, millions of people in this country had to work 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. These workers spend all of their time at work so that they have no time to spend with their family, with their children. They have no time to give them the guidance and the nurtures and the love that they need in order to grow up as healthy, happy human beings, the future leaders of our country. I believe that the social compact in this country has been destroyed. You know, when I was growing up, I used to remember that they used to talk about that there were 24 hours in a day, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for sleep. Now it seems that more and more of these hours go to work and fewer to play or to sleep. And what that means is that the social fabric of our communities is being shredded. And we see the consequences of these policies every single day in the front pages of our newspapers or in the news programs of our television stations. We see stories of violence, of drug use, of gangs, of generational alienation. And pensions, you know, which are supposed to be the safety net for our golden years, these pension plans are being decimated. We also read about that every day in the newspapers. In the airlines, at GM, at Ford, in the steel companies, at IBM, and on and on and on. And at the same time, public sector pension funds are under attack. Private sector workers are being told, if you don't have a decent pension plan, why should these public sector workers using your tax money have a pension plan? Let's take it away from them. That way we can all be miserable together. And you know, when you destroy the safety net, what's going to happen to the future generation of seniors? Now, that's a bigger worry for me the more time goes by. Who's going to take care of the seniors? Are we going to transfer the responsibility to the taxpayers to take care of them? Or are we just simply going to abandon them to their fate? Is that what we as a society want to see? That after years of work, they should just be left to fend for themselves? I don't think that's who America is. And so, why is all of this happening? At the same time, we look around and we see rampant corporate crime, where CEOs use the coffers of their companies as their own private piggy banks. You know who I'm talking about. You read it in the newspaper. You're talking about Enron, WorldCom, Adelphia, Healthcare South, and on and on and on. Now, these CEO crooks not only steal money from their companies, they're destroying jobs. They're destroying shareholder equity, and they're destroying communities in the process. Corporate greed has replaced corporate philanthropy as the operating model, and our society is much worse off because of it. And even those corporations where the CEOs aren't stealing money, too many of them are adopting the Walmart model. Pay the cheapest wages, provide no benefits, and shift responsibility for workers' health care onto the taxpayers. Ship the jobs off overseas to China, to India, to Singapore, other countries where people can or have to work for lower wages and no benefits. Maximize profits at all costs. Now, whether this model results in wiping out small businesses, creating more poverty, or increasing the taxpayer burdens, that's the new corporate model. That's a new business model. And too bad for the communities that are impacted by it. And the labor movement, which has always been the workers' tool to help them deal with these issues and to protect their interests, at the time when we need to be the strongest, we find ourselves at a weakest point. Today, only 12% of all workers belong to a union. And no matter how hard we work, it is impossible to turn the tide because we're simply not strong enough. So what are we to do? What's the solution? How do we fight back effectively? Well, we at SEIU, we believe that we can only do that by uniting all workers to fight together for the common good. We believe that we cannot afford to be divided. We cannot afford to be divided by race, by gender, by age, by language, and certainly not by immigration status. Because when we allow ourselves to be divided, we all lose. And the consequences of this unity are painfully obvious. Lower wages, less benefits, less hope for the future. So when I talk to you now about my opinion on what's going on with this immigration debate in this country, I'm looking at it from within this context about what's happening to workers in this country. Now, if you listen to politicians, particularly during the last election cycle, you would think that all of the problems that I've just talked about are the fault of immigrants. If you listen to some of you would think that immigrants are just so eager to come to the U.S. to work for low wages, to work for no benefits, and have no labor rights. Well, let me tell you, that is baloney. Immigrants don't come to this country to be exploited. Immigrants come to this country because, like generations of immigrants before them, they have a vision for a better life for themselves and for their families. They come knowing and expecting to work hard to contribute in order to have a chance at the American dream. They're not responsible for what's happening here in this country. They're not the ones that are deciding to pay low wages or take away health insurance. They're not the ones making those decisions. They're not the ones that are looting the corporations and putting them out of business. They're not the ones that are shipping good jobs off to China, India, and other places. They're not responsible for rising prices of food, gasoline, and housing. These decisions are being made by bean counters and greedy CEOs with a wink and a nod of too many politicians who depend on corporate contributions for their political war chests. These modern corporate raiders don't care about the communities. They don't care about workers or their families. They care about the bottom line profit statement. The larger, the better. Now I say you can't blame them. They are who they are. They're not in charge of creating a better future for our family. They're not in charge of creating healthy communities. They are not, what they are in charge of is making their companies as profitable as possible. We are the ones who are in charge of our family's future, and it is up to us to take action to defend ourselves and our communities. So the way I view it, if we're all suffering from the same things, doesn't it make sense that we all join together, regardless of where we come from or how we got here? It doesn't matter, in my view, whether we came here on the deck or in the hold of the Mayflower. It doesn't matter if we got here 300 years ago or one day ago. It doesn't matter if we got here by plane, by boat, by bus, or by walking through the desert. What matters, in my view, is that we're all in the same boat now. And that little boat that I call America is headed to the shoals, and it's bringing leaks all over the place. And if we're going to reach safe harbor, we better learn how to row together. Now, I think we can change the direction of this country. It's not too late. But we are going to do that. I think we need to do things differently than the way we have been doing them. So I have 4 little points that I think we need to do to help get us there. So first, let me talk about immigrants. Because there are 12 million of them here without any rights. I think they need to have the same rights and obligations as the rest of us. And to accomplish that, we need to change our current immigration system, a system that is completely broken and does not serve anyone's best interests. Now, under our current immigration system, there are only 5,000 visas available per year for people who want to come to this country. That's nowhere near close to what's needed to meet the demand. Now, about 400,000 to 500,000 people come here every year. They come for different reasons. Some come because they want to get an education. Some come because there were hurricanes in their home countries and it destroyed everything they had. Some come because they live in a dictatorship and they want a taste of freedom. Some come because there was an earthquake that destroyed their homes and their families. Some come because they live under such massive poverty that they cannot bear to see their children hungry or dying because of a lack of medicine. And some come simply because they have a dream of a better life. And when people want to come and look for a better life, they'll find a way. And so since our legal system does not provide them an opportunity to come, a whole different system has come up to accomplish illegally what our legal system won't provide them, an opportunity to come into the U.S. So how do they get here? Well, some of them jump fences, some of them overstay their visas, some of them come walking through the desert, some crawl under drainage pipes that are infested with rats. They're guided by smugglers. They pay between $5,000 and $10,000 each, money that they borrowed any way they can so that they can pay the smuggler. Many of them never make it here. Dozens of people fall off trains and get crushed when they fall under the wheels of these trains. Others are killed on the way when they're assaulted by gangs. And of all of those that make it to the border and start trying to cross, a lot of them get caught and then they get sent back. But others make it and they start walking through the desert. Over 400 people die every single year walking through the desert. They die of exposure to the heat or to the cold. They die in the utmost agony, alone. Sometimes their bodies are eaten by desert animals and their bones are scattered throughout the desert. Many are never identified if they get found, and they're buried in anonymous graves. And you know, their families will never know what happened to them. They know they left, but not what happened to them. And of those that do make it through, and they get to America, they need to find a job really quickly because they need to pay off the smuggler. And they also need to survive. So they take whatever job's available, whatever hours they're given, under dangerous conditions, at whatever wages they're paid, sometimes under the table. Many times they don't get paid what was agreed upon, or sometimes they don't even get paid. And because they have no documents, if they complain, they get deported. A number of them may have enough money, so they buy fake documents. And so they find a regular job, just like any of us. They pay taxes. They get deducted from their paycheck, income tax, Social Security. But you know what? Because of their undocumented status, they will never see one single penny of all those contributions that they make. Now, they also pay, by the way, taxes when they buy food. They pay taxes when they buy gasoline. They pay all the taxes that we do. And a number of them who are real entrepreneurs, they may start up little businesses. So they pay business taxes as well. And a whole bunch of them, not enough, a whole bunch of them join unions because they know that's the way they're going to improve their conditions. And you know, when they join unions, they are among the strongest and the most committed members, as evidenced by our campaign of Justice for Janitors. The hotel workers, the laborers have organized, a lot of construction workers. But you know, no matter how successful our unions are in improving their wages and their working conditions on the job, when they leave that job, they are illegal with no rights. And every day when they leave their home, they are running the risk of being arrested and being deported. Now, most of us, when we leave in the morning to go to our jobs, we expect to come home. They don't know whether they're going to come home. Now, who are these people? A lot of people think that somehow they're single men with no connections to anything else. Well, you know, many of them, because it's been 20 years since we had a legalization program, many of them have come to this country, they've gotten married to U.S. citizens or legal residents, they have U.S.-born children. They have built a life in this country now. They're union leaders, they're community leaders, they're workers. Many of them, as I said, are small business owners. They are deacons and ministers in their churches. They are our co-workers. They're our neighbors. They are part of our communities. They are part of us. And we believe that they deserve a chance to come out of the shadows of our society. Now, this problem cries out for leadership from our elected officials. And I'm convinced this is not brain surgery. There are solutions. We need a system that will allow all of the current undocumented workers to legalize their status. If people want to say they need to be able to be punished for having come here on undocumented status, fine, they can pay a fine. They can pay a fine. They can pay back taxes. But after all is said and done, give them a chance. Legalize them, send them back to work so they can support their families. The second thing that we need to do is that we need to find a way so that future immigrants can come to this country in a safe, legal, and orderly manner. They should not have to come through the desert the way they are doing now. And they should come here with full labor rights so that they are not subject to exploitation. We can do this. It is not hard. All it takes is for this Congress and this president to actually get to work and give us a comprehensive immigration reform that works. Now, this is good for the immigrants if we do this. But let me tell you, this is good for this country as well. First, they are already in our communities. They are working, they're helping our economy grow. And taking them out of that illegal status will create much more opportunity for them and for other people. But the second thing that I think is good for America is that it would save us a ton of money. We're spending right now $10.4 billion on border security. $10.4 billion. And we are going to double the Border Patrol to 18,000 agents. We're also going to be talking about building a 700-mile fence, 15 to 20 feet high, at a cost of $10 to $15 million per mile. Now, you add all of those numbers up, and now we're talking some real money, $25 to $30 billion. And what's the purpose of this 18,000 border agents and this 700-mile fence and this 18,000 border patrolmen? To catch nannies, farm workers, construction workers. This is silly. We could use those $25, $30 billion to deal with issues of education and health care. There's lots of uses that we could put that money to. And we would free up the Border Patrol to focus on trying to catch drug traffickers, terrorists if there are any, even though nobody can prove whether there's been any terrorists trying to sneak in through, walking through the desert. But they could focus on that rather than on trying to keep people from coming in to work in this country. So I do think that we have an opportunity to try and resolve this problem this year with a new Congress and a president who badly needs to get something resolved about the business of America. I don't think that it's a question of whether there will be immigration reform. It's a question of when. And it is also a question whether the public continues to insist that it is high time that we solve this problem. The second thing that we need to do is I think we need to restore democracy to our workplaces. Now, I don't know how many of you have organized a union before, but let me just tell you what happens. When workers want to organize a union, the company immediately hires consultants to run anti-union campaigns. Now, these are campaigns based on harassment, intimidation, and terminations. These consultants then go and have one-on-one meetings with the workers. They call them into a room and start interrogating them about their union activities. They threaten them with a loss of benefits. They tell them about how they may have to shut down the plant and they won't have any jobs. They work on turning worker against worker in order to divide and conquer. And then they focus on the presumed leaders and suspend them or fire them in order to make an example of them so that the other workers will not organize. Now, you think this is illegal, and it is. So here's the way it works. If somebody gets fired, then you have to file a complaint with the National Labor Relations Board. Now, this is a federal agency supposed to enforce immigration and labor law, and protect workers' rights. But this board has been rendered toothless by political appointees to the agency. I actually think instead of being called the National Labor Relations Board, it should be called the National Lawyers Relief Board, because that's the way it works. It's now been a process where lawyers have taken over, and their job is to delay, and deny. So you file a complaint with the NLRB if somebody gets fired. Then they have to investigate whether there was a violation. This could take months of investigation. Then if the NLRB says, well, there's a probable cause that a violation occurred, so then they go talk to the employer and says, do you promise not to do this again? And will you sign a statement saying you won't do it again? If the employer says, no, we don't agree that's what happened, Then they have to set a hearing to find out if, in fact, a violation occurred. Now, that can take many, many more months. Then, the employer, if there is a hearing, then they got to wait for the decision. The decision goes against the employer. They can appeal it. This takes many, many, many more months. The employer loses the appeal. They can appeal it to the regional director. Many, many, many more months. They lose that appeal. They can appeal to Washington. Many, many, many more months. They lose there again. They can appeal to the courts. This all could take years. And I had a couple of cases that took years. Now, what happens in the meantime? The leaders are fired. The consultants are still holding those meetings. And there is no remedies to all of these violations. The union cannot get access to talk to the workers to clarify anything. So, what winds up happening is, in most cases, workers wind up being beaten down, and either no election is held, or in some cases, the workers give up and vote against organizing. And even in the case where the union wins, the company can refuse to negotiate, and then you go back to the appeals over and over and over again. And what happens if the company loses the case? They again have to post a notice promising not to do it again, and if they fired a worker, the company has to pay him back wages minus any money they earned while they were fired. So if they earned the same amount as they would have been earning at the company, at the place they were working where they got fired from, the back pay is zero. There is no adequate remedy to be able to solve this. So I think that if we're going to solve this, we need to be able to restore democracy to the workplace. We need to reform the laws, to effectively punish violations of the law, and to establish workers' rights to freely choose whether they want to organize a union. But I don't believe that alone is going to change the situations. We also have to invest money. Unions have to invest more resources in expanding our organizing programs. That's what SEIU and 6 other unions have done by forming the Change to Win Federation. We are committed to uniting more workers into our unions so that together we can fight for the American dream. We're doing that because we are becoming a union island in a non-union sea. Now, you know what happens to islands the first time that a hurricane comes along. You're going to get wiped out. And we are acutely aware that the smaller we become, the worse conditions get for workers. At the same time that capital is globalizing. We have gone from a national and regional economies to a global economy, one where corporations now have worldwide reach and power. And in that setting, our ability to impact them and their behavior has been greatly, greatly diminished. So while we need to continue, labor needs to continue organizing in America, we also need to build alliances with unions around the world that are working for the same corporations that we work for here in the U.S. Many of these corporations now operate in 120 countries. So how successful could we be impacting them only in the U.S. when they operate in that many parts around the world? We are learning that solidarity does not begin or end at national borders. Capital learned that lesson. Labor needs to learn that lesson as well. The third thing that we need to do is to create a new dynamic in politics, a dynamic that will be based on issues, not parties or candidates. What we've had over the last couple of years is a situation where we have one party that has ignored us and another one that too often takes us for granted, with the result being an erosion of the standard of living for all Americans. So we believe that what we need to do is say to candidates, if you want us to vote for you, you need to vote for the issues that matter to workers and to our communities. You have to deal with this healthcare crisis. You need to vote for living wages, for adequate resources for our schools so our children can get a decent education. And you have to support workers' rights and the rights of undocumented workers. We believe we need to raise the bar of what we expect from public officials. It is no longer good enough that we only see some of these candidates during the election period. And after the election is held, we don't see them again. And it's no longer enough to say, mi casa es su casa. And whether they say it in perfect English or broken Spanish, it still is not enough. I think we need to demand actions, not words. And when this becomes the standard for judging candidates, in the end, this will result not only in improved political representation, but more importantly, I believe in a stronger democracy. The fourth thing and final thing I think we need to do is to understand that the problems that we are facing are too big for any one organization, no matter how strong we are. What we need to do is build coalitions that will help us win, and we are beginning to do that because we are finding that there are many other groups that share our concerns of what's happening in this country, that share our values, that are working on many of the same things, but we all work in isolation, in silos. So we're working with churches now, with community organizations, with elected officials, with business, and with concerned individuals. You know, we have, on the issue of immigration reform, made common cause with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. We could not agree with them on anything else but on this one issue. We are on the same page. And while we may not agree on everything, if we can agree on one thing, then we need to work to try and solve that. We just made a coalition with the Business Roundtable on the question of resolving the issue of health care in this country. There are groups like that that are willing to work with us. So we have to understand what drives this work is a shared recognition that the current situation is not working, and we cannot afford to stand on the sidelines and complain or wait for somebody else to solve our problems. We're convinced that that someone else is us, that it is up to us and we have the obligation to deal with these issues so that we do not leave future generations a world that is worse than the world we found. Now, this is a beginning. This is not to say that we have reached the point where we are actually effectively doing that, but we are on the right road. The issues that we're facing in this country are complex and they're difficult to resolve, but I'm convinced that we can do it. And we are committed to working together to find a solution with all of these groups. And I think we can do it. I actually do. I'm very optimistic, regardless of the way I may have sounded when I started talking about our current state of affairs. Because I believe when you look at history, that you find that it's full of examples of how ordinary people have accomplished extraordinary things when they believe in themselves and have a shared vision of what is possible. When I look at history, I see how Gandhi and the Indian people changed the course of a continent with sacrifice and nonviolence. And I look at history, I see how Martin Luther King changed the course of a country and taught us the power of nonviolence and commitment. Even in the face of hatred, intolerance, and state power. When I look at history, I lived it with Cesar Chavez, who organized a group of powerless immigrants, strangers to this land, and through the power of nonviolence, created a movement and a belief in people that there is value in work and that everyone is worthy of respect. That through our commitment, we can in fact be the stewards of our own destiny. So I believe that we can do this. I believe that the challenges that we face will demand the best that is in us, but that if we remain united, we can and we will accomplish these goals. And when we do that, we'll reclaim once again the American dream for each and every one of us, and more importantly, for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please stay here. Well, Eliseo has indicated a willingness to take some questions and comments, but before we do that, I do want to just do a couple of things here. We are quite thrilled and honored to have you here, and the gift that you've given to us can't be repaid in any way with physical objects. But we do have a few things that we wanted to share with you. First of all, from the staff at the Institute of Labor and Industrial Relations, they wanted you to have your own ILIR shirt.
All right.
Which you can wear with pride.
Thank you.
It's a good size.
Thank you so much.
They even also included your own ILIR keychain and fob, which you can
All
wear.
right.
But really, from all the co-sponsors of the conference, because this is such a special talk and a place where we hope you'll keep Illinois in your heart, this is a book called Insight, which is pictures from the University of Illinois, and we hope that it helps to remind you of the time that we've shared together.
Thank you so
So
much.
with that, I want to just
Thank you.
say our
Thank you so
thank
much.
yous, really from all of the folks that have organized this conference.
Thank you so much.
And
Now, if it wasn't so cold, I might consider moving here.
Hi. Is this
yes, you're right.
fine? Why isn't Walmart unionized? I mean, of course, they're brutal and so on, but cracking that nut would cut a major cancer out of the social fabric and the economic life of the entire country. They're very pervasive and a very important target. So what's the problem? Why haven't they been unionized?
So one comment on Walmart. Thank you.
Yeah, we'd like to know more about the experience of your union organizing undocumented immigrants, the prospects and problems with that issue in particular.
We'd like to know what is a proper response to the comment that illegal immigrants have broken the law and that they should leave this country because of that.
And we had a similar question to that. I heard on the radio one of the answers that you gave a caller in today about kind of a retroactive tax plan or a penalty for people who'd been in the country for a number of years. And I was wondering what kind of a burden you think that would place on workers who are making low wages anyway, and then also what kind of a penalty there would be for employers who'd been exploiting workers for this time. And another question that came up in our group was an idea of tying this into fixing the Social Security safety net. We talked about pensions a little bit earlier, but it'd be nice if you could address Social Security specifically. Thank you.
So let's stop there. We've had issues raised about organizing Walmart and how do we understand that. We've had issues raised about how do you organize the immigrant community, broadly defined. We've had questions, what do you say when people say, you know, they're here illegally? How do you, what's a constructive way to engage that conversation? And we have a number of questions that really get into the whole set of
Policy.
issues around the policy.
Okay. All right.
You don't have to take them in that order.
Well, just from Walmart, I think that we haven't focused on it enough. You know, the UFCW and SEIU have run 2 campaigns against them, and we're actually knocking the BGs out of them. Their stock is down, and there's some discussion that they may fire their CEO because of it, and they have not figured out how to deal with these questions about the low wages, the impact on communities, the lack of health insurance. The problem that we're going at is, I think, that we are challenging their business model. Their business model is based on low wages and low benefits and paying low prices to their suppliers. And so if we change that, then they have a whole different business model. I happen to believe that they can still be a successful company. They do that. Obviously, they disagree. So I think that the more pressure we put on them and the more that the American public begins to turn against them, I think it's going to be easier to organize. And I hope that we as labor really begin to focus on doing it. Because I am convinced that one of the things about somebody that big, that while they seem to be big and powerful, their very size is also their weakness. And you can actually get to it. So I think at some point, we're going to need to turn our attention to actually organizing them. Interestingly enough, in China, they're all union. And in Mexico, they're all union. The problem is what kind of union, but that's a different matter. On the question that you raised about the people being here illegally, true, they are. They broke the law in being here. But in fact, there are a lot of laws in this country that are broken routinely by many of us, including, you know, I speed in violation of the speed limit law, and I get caught every once in a while. I pay a fine for doing it. So I think that well, we understand that they broke the law. That's why it comes to the question about people saying that there ought to be a fine for, ought to be paid for having broken the law. Instead of making it a criminal case, treat it more in the nature of a civil violation, because it was not a crime against persons. And so a fine, you know, would be a way that people would say, okay, I broke the law, I paid a penalty, now I can go forward and get myself reinstated and processed into good graces. It will put a burden on workers having to come up with that money, no question. I also don't think that you can make it exorbitant so that it becomes totally unattainable and it becomes a barrier to actually legalizing. But I think that people are so hungry for legalizing that they will figure out a way of coming up with a reasonable fine if that's what it took. And so I think that what we need to say to people, yes, people broke the law and they need to pay a penalty for having done that. But at the end of the day, what we want to do is fix the problem, not punish people, because that won't get us to a point of resolving the issue.
There was also questions that were raised. How do you organize?
Oh, organizing. Well, you know what? Actually, I found undocumented workers to be the ones that want to organize more than anybody else. You know, I mean, they are a tough bunch. Remember, these are people that walk thousands of miles, that walk through the desert, that rode railroad cars to get here. These are people who are hungry for something. And when you go out and people feel like you actually have a plan and a vision of how their life will be better if they do this, man, they join and they're really eager. So I would say that of the janitors that we've organized, and this is just my own off the top of my head estimate, I'd say that 60-70% have been undocumented janitors. And not just Latinos, Eastern Europeans. We got in the East Coast, we got a lot of people from, from Ireland, from Poland, from Bulgaria, believe it or not. And in California, we got Armenians. So they're from all over, but people want to join because they see that as a means of being able to get a better life. So, and when they join that union, they are the most loyal, most committed, strongest union members ever. It's like me, when I came to this country, I joined the union, and when I first saw, and through the union, I got a chance to have a voice. For them, it's more than just simply a question of hours and of the wages and benefits. It is also a question of respect. And that is a major intangible on why people want to be in a union. And so my experience is people are, and they are really active also in their communities when they they get organized. I think they're really an asset to this country. And we should recognize it as such. There was one more.
Well, actually, I think
We covered the waterfront.
But although I'm mindful of time, let's do one more round of questions, if we could. Actually, do you mind coming to use the microphone?
I just wanted to ask of the cost of deportation, what the taxpayer's burden would be, because that is what the conservatives are looking at as the solution, along with this 700-mile wall.
I'm curious about the parameters of a relationship with the business group on healthcare issues and what that might look like and where we might go with that in order to solve the healthcare problem.
Okay, so we have a question about just the actual cost of deportation, the kind of terms of partnership with business when it comes to healthcare. Let's take one or two more.
All right, I have two different comments. The first one we were talking about in our group was about when talking about the reasons for immigration, we were noting that that in the talk, when you were talking about changing U.S. policy towards immigration, you weren't talking about changing U.S. policies such as free trade policies that are creating the economic push that's also forcing people to come, not only for a vision of a better life, but because people are forced from their countries. So just reminding how that's an important part of the conversation. But then also wanting to hear your experience with the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, if SEIU has any formal relationship or just your own take on that campaign.